right, we'll open for questions now, but first I would like to pick up on something that you said. In connection with rising levels of fear, lack of trust, etc. Civita is, of course, a liberal think tank, and rumors will have it that Israel is getting also increasing illiberal. I'm not sure, and I would like to hear what you think about that, Gadi, especially. Are liberal actors getting more marginalized, and is this sort of depiction correct? How can you comment on that?
Well, first of all, I think Israel is very misleading in many ways. Although I was impressed with Hanne's objective indexes of fear, but Israel has been uniquely immune to terrorism because we have so much experience that we know that terrorism works if it spreads terror. And Tel Avivians did not stop going to cafes when cafes were exploding. And this is a situation very hard to explain to Europeans because Tel Aviv is very small. Half of the suicide bombings, I heard them in my apartment. There was one on the boardwalk near the sea. I could hear it in the middle of the night. There was a bus 300 meters away from my home. And there was something about Tel Avivians, we will not stop going to cafes. This sounds unheroic. We are all now in a cafe and there's nothing heroic about it. But when terror is designed to paralyze your society and it just doesn't work. So in this sense, Israel has been extremely resistant and I'm glad for it. Secondly, it's very hard to capture the mentality of extreme contradictions in Israel. I wrote, this is never said in my when I presented to educated crowds, but I also wrote a novel about strip clubs. And I hung around with like the lowest echelons of society, like the late night sleazy bars and all this. And the lower you go, you will find more xenophobia. And I was sitting with this girl in this bar. It was like 4 a.m. in the morning, and she was explaining to me why all the Arabs should be shot and deported. I was trying to make out in what order, because it makes things complicated. If you first shoot them, and then, or you have to deport and then chase them. And I was listening to this, really, this constituency in Israel had a political party once, and it was banned from parliament. It was a tiny party that openly supported deportation. So she belonged to that party in her opinion, but then it turned out, and she told me all the Arabs hate us and they're all horrible and they're murderers and all that. And it later turned out she had an Arab boyfriend and they have a child together. And so when you live in such an extreme situation, it's very hard to capture the nuances of the moods, because Israelis have one mind for ideology and another very practical mind. Mind you, that Israel is a 20% Arab minority. It's a national minority. It's not a religious minority, which is a difference I'd be glad to discuss. But this is why there is no possibility of a common identity, because a national identity is defined by wanting to preserve its identity apart from the majority. And the way to do that, you can read our Declaration of Independence, or else the EU's Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, which by and large describes the Israeli constitutional framework for treating a minority. But we live with 80% Jews and 20% Arabs who are Palestinians, and with whom we have a constant war for 100 years, and we still get along in one democracy. I think this is stunning. I don't know of any other example, and it requires a sort of double think. You have a political opinion, but you also have a pragmatic turn of mind. And just my last remark would be that in the Israeli mind in general, they are aware of much of the Palestinian suffering, but in their view, and I think in an important sense rightly, Palestinians have consistently rejected partition. No matter who the government was and when it was offered, beginning with the Peel Commission in 1937 and ending with the Kerry Plan. Now, Palestinians have consistently rejected partition. They could have had a state many times over, and they have rejected it. And the litmus test for this is the right of return. Every time the negotiation reaches the final point and they demand the right of return. The right of return is the right of return of only Palestinians have refugee status, which is passed on to your children. No, there's no such thing in any other place. There are 5 million refugees at least, some say up to 9 million, 5 million who are likely to return. If you demand the right of return, it means that there would be an Arab majority in Israel. So you have partition, but Israel with an Arab majority, and this is what my friend Alex Jacobson calls the two-state solution, the two states on average solution. There will be 2 states, 1.5 for them and half for us. So Israel there is no situation in the world when Israel would accept what amounts to national suicide. And as long as they're not willing to give it up, Israelis will not think that there is a partner. As I said, we tried to impose a 2-state solution by unilaterally withdrawing. This is because Israelis began to think that Israelis, or you will forgive Jews for being a little paranoid after 2,000 years, but they have started to think that part of the Palestinian strategy is to avoid partition in order to finally have a 1-state solution in which eventually there would be an Arab majority, and therefore Zionism will sink in this vast Arab region. And if you read the Palestinian press, they keep talking about us like the Crusaders. We are a temporary phenomena, an invasion from Europe, never mind that we're not all European, but eventually we will get tired and go away or else shrink back into a minority. And since this is explicit in the Palestinian press, and since if you look at I know Israel in the news, it looks like Israel is about 2/3 of the globe, and the rest have no problems. But Israel is this tiny little country inside a vast, very hostile region which has a declared policy of genocide towards us. So it's true that we are very strong in many senses, but in an historical perspective, if you think that 7 million Jews can survive among hundreds of millions of people who reject their very right to exist, with Hamas, people not only glorify terrorists, they glorify it as part of a philosophy where killing Jews just for being Jewish is considered a great virtue. If you read the Hamas charter, killing Jews is a positive value. So you will forgive Israelis for being slightly paranoid. The fact that you're paranoid doesn't mean that nobody is chasing you.
Okay. Thank you. I need to remind the audience that you just have to signal me. This is the first time I've been at a meeting debating Israel that no one has actually listed yet. So, but Erling, you will comment on that.
If I'm allowed to pose questions to Gabi.
Sure.
So I had 2 very different questions. One I thought about before coming here, but I was in Israel a month ago, and when we had this incident of the soldier who shot wounded Palestinian. And the first day I read it in the Israeli media, and you got the reaction from Netanyahu and from the chief of staff, and I thought, yeah, this is a sensible reaction from the authorities to condemn an action like that. But then people started to say they sympathize with the soldier. And on Monday there was a big rally in Tel Aviv in support of him. And in fact, I have problems with understanding what's going on there. How that the people can hold that kind of opinions. So I just wanted you to explain it. And but then the second was, I heard that you know a lot about Zionism, and I've been thinking a lot about this. What is a Jewish state? What is the essential thing? Is it the Jewish majority, Is it the right for all Jews to come to Israel? Is it the flag and the national anthem? Is it the religion? Or what is it? What's essential for having a Jewish state?
Give me 2 hours and I will explain this in great detail.
Would you like to respond on that, or
sure?
And then we'll have actually 4 questions from.
I'll defer the Zionism question. I think it's a very long one. Just say some remarks about the soldiers. The soldier. If you don't know the incident, the soldier shot an already neutralized terrorist to try to kill them, and he was on the ground. And the soldier came and just took out his weapon, just shot the guy dead in the head after he was helpless. And indeed, the IDF, the chief of the IDF, immediately said that this is not our way and this is not what we do. And so did the Minister of Defense and the Prime Minister. But there were many people who started supporting this soldier, which is, I think, a measure of public anger, which I wouldn't want to say is justified, but one can understand the context. And just to show you how the debate is disproportional about Israel, not long ago, a British Marine soldier shot a terrorist in Afghanistan. I thought was dead after he was tied. And he was taken to trial. There was a huge rally of the Marines and the Marine veterans that he should not be tried. There was support from political leaders all over the spectrum. There was support from the royal family denouncing the harsh way in this, that this person was judged. And the British court refused. The thing that happened is that this murderer was bragging. He said, "Here, I'm breaking the Geneva Convention," boom. But someone had a camera on their helmet who recorded the whole thing. And this was brought to court, including him bragging that he's breaking the Geneva Convention. And the court refused to let the video leak because they said this is going to damage England's standing internationally. So we will not, we ban publicizing this video. Just another short example, there was an unbelievably horrendous massacre in the Vietnam War called the My Lai massacre. You might have heard of it, it's very famous. They indulged in an orgy of killing citizens, just murdered children, old people, women, everyone. Only one person was convicted, and he was convicted for killing 22 civilians, innocent civilians. The whole of the country rebelled against him being tried. The White House got 5,000 telegrams, only 1% of which demanded him being tried. All the others were demanding that he would be released. The big peacekeeper, Jimmy Carter, who was then governor of Georgia, demanded from all his citizens to go with their lights on to support the soldier. So this is not commendable when it's in the US. This is not commendable when it's in Israel. It's not commendable when it's in England. These people should be tried and judged harshly. But remember also that a society in danger who sends people to the front loses some of its sensibilities and demands absolute support for their children. And this should be fought against, and this should be resisted. But it exists everywhere. And Israel, in that sense, is no different. It's just under longer and stronger strain.
Thank you. We'll take the first question. Gentleman in the bar.
My name is Øystein Grønning. I have a question related to the information that came from you that there is no coordinated opposition among the Palestinians. They have been lacking leadership, and that's one of the reasons why we have a knife intifada, which is ludicrous. It doesn't achieve anything. But Menachem Klein, whom I know personally, wrote in Haaretz last week, and it's translated. I got it yesterday in the English from the Israeli publication Plus 972 on the net. He says that Marwan Barghouti from jail has brokered a deal with Hamas and Jihad to coordinate a new intifada, a peaceful one. And Menachem writes that It's an unarmed popular struggle against the Israeli occupation and the establishment of a Palestinian state in the 1967 territories. This is with Islamic Jihad and Hamas. And this is also a move. They have a manifesto that's published late March. It's a move to oust Abbas, of course. And Saeb Erekat has sided with Barghouti now. That's important. He's been a chief negotiator for the Palestinians for decades. So there seems to be an opening for something that could lead to a third intifada, a peaceful one. And of course, the Palestinians, as usual, will be massacred, but they will be it on prime television all over the world, which might gain them a lot of support around. I'd like your comments on it, because it's an interesting thing.
Thank you. Who would like to start? Erling, perhaps.
Yeah, I read this report you're talking about. I was very surprised by it because it's calling for a new round of the first intifada, a non-violent, Gandhi-inspired intifada, where Israel will lose their moral support in the world even more than they have. But there are two very surprising, problematic questions to it. The one is that it says that Hamas and Islamic Jihad has agreed to a two-state solution. That was a very new thing for me. I thought they always were against it. And so then something very big must have been happening in these circles. The second thing is Marwan Barghouti is an interesting person. He's the only one who gets support in the Palestinian polls, so 30%. All the others are far below that. But he's in jail, with life sentence. So how can he become a leader for anything? So yeah, it's a very interesting article, but I think we have to see something more than just that article to really believe that this is happening.
Okay, thank you. We have. Would you like to say anything more on that? Or? No. Okay, we'll have more questions here. The lady in red here, first row.
Hello, my name is Hilde Pape. I think this is a very interesting discussion, but what I do miss is a representative for the population of Palestine. I miss that, and I think that we should never, never forget that we are talking about a military occupation. Never, ever. Which makes the whole difference. And Norwegians were occupied too, 1940 to 45. We lived in the military rule as well. The Palestinians living in the West Bank do not have any basic human rights. They are not allowed to move freely. They have no. They are being judged under military rule. Their children are taken away at night raids. They live in a horrible situation. Why do we don't keep sight of the Palestinian suffering? And as regards a two or a one-state solution, well, how is it possible to create two states when there are just small islands left with Palestinian population? And how do you create a Palestinian leadership when freedom of movement is so restricted that when I was in Palestine this autumn, my guide, who lived in Bethlehem, he was a Christian Palestinian, he was allowed, he was so happy, he was allowed for the first time for many years to go from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. It's a half-an-hour drive because he wasn't allowed to move freely because he was a Palestinian. So never ever forget about oppression. This makes me angry, actually.
Okay, thank you. You can pass on to the gentleman at the table there with the glasses.
Mitt navn Odd Dag Bjørndal, og jeg har vært involvert i å... I'm sorry, Mr. Taub.
Thank you.
Heartily welcome to
I thought you have a very harsh accent.
You are now visiting a country smaller than yours. We have based our future on a couple of international principles. We believe in the charter between nations and the general human rights. As you very well put it, we have a situation with occupation. If you go a couple of steps down here, we have just celebrated the end of the Second World War when we were occupied. And there you will find a guy with a bicycle. He was a very poorly equipped, resistant man. And they worked just like all situations where there is a war. When Israel was established, you had two so-called terrorist organizations. In Palestine, there are two so-called terrorist organizations. In Norway, we had our own. They were heroes. They stood up against a tremendous military force, as the people in Palestine is doing. So we must never forget that the reason for we are here today discussing this is the occupation.
Thank you.
Please comment on that.
Okay, there's two comments now. Do not forget that there's military occupation.
Yes.
First, Hanne, and then Gadi. Thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't actually directed to you, but to something that was discussed before. I think the whole thing about a two-state solution obviously comes up all the time, and it's I don't know how to describe the situation, because now all solutions are apparently utopia. And still, I go back to the statistics again and again, but it's interesting to see that whenever you ask Israelis or Palestinians, everyone's in favor of a two-state solution. Right now, I think it's about 80% of Israelis too that are in favor of a two-state solution. And still, you can say, well, you can say that it's not possible the way it is. I think it's always, I wonder why we don't really follow up what we actually, because the next question is obviously then what we actually mean with two-state solution. And I think that's one of the, I don't know if I should, who's to blame, but why we don't really ask the second question, because Israelis and Palestinians obviously mean two different things and refer to two different territories when they talk about two-state solution. In the international arena, we talk about the 67 borders. Israelis do not concur or agree with that way of, they're more, how can I put it, flexible in the sense when you, where to draw borders. When I say flexible, it doesn't necessarily mean that you would make a two-state solution that would take all the West Bank, but also, for example, also take part of what's now the state of Israel. But it's interesting sometimes if you start looking at sort of hard facts and the data and statistics from Israel and Palestine, they seem very contradictory. So I wonder if what we should actually stick onto, because I think the way now, and it's just, we always come back to two-state solution is impossible, but which solution is actually possible? Because in the end, there will have to be a solution, and we cannot stick to utopia.
Thank you. Gadi, you would like to respond, and after that, we have a gentleman over there in brown jacket and a lady by the window. But first, you can respond.
Well, I'll try to answer as politely as I can, though I want my protest to be taken notice of. That the comparison with the Nazi occupation of Norway is preposterous. The Nazi movement was planning to dominate the world. Israel occupied the West Bank after it was attacked on 3 fronts, and after it has been, it was born in the midst of a genocidal war against Israel. Furthermore, we've left Gaza. If you think of the situation in bare human rights criteria, for the population of Gaza, the situation has become worse. Hamas is a far more violent form of government. When Hamas took over, they flat out executed 1,400 Fatah operatives. I don't mean to defend the occupation. I'm not for the occupation. Israel in general is not for the occupation, and it has been looking for ways to end it. True, there is also the right wing and there's the settlers. The settlers about which I've written a book are, to my mind, not at all a part of Zionism. They are a part of a messianic religious movement who believes in redemption through acquisition of land. while Zionism has always stemmed from and based itself morally on the idea that all peoples have the right to self-determination. If you want to know why Israel shifted towards the two-state solution, is because it is Zionist. The logic of Zionism, if you ever read our Declaration of Independence, states that it is the natural right of the Jewish people to be, like all peoples, masters of their own fate in their own sovereign state. This is why Israelis moved for a two-state solution. Now, the discussion of Palestinian suffering is, of course, very relevant, but it is somehow assumed that it is only Israel's responsibility, while, at least from the Israeli perspective, repeatedly, we have offered a fair deal for a two-state solution. Fair by Clinton's standards, fair by the Quartet standards, fair by the UN standards, and these have been consistently rejected. So we may have elaborate explanations for why each round of negotiations, most recently the Kerry attempt for negotiation, why they failed. But if there was a single Anwar Sadat among the Palestinians, we would have long ago reached a deal with Peres and Rabin, with Ehud Barak, with Ehud Olmert, and even on the basis of the Kerry plan, which Israel generally accepted. But the Palestinians are sticking to a peace plan, which is called the Arab League peace plan, which insists on a solution to the refugee problem according to Resolution 194 of the UN Assembly from 1948, which means the return of the refugees to their homes. This means the complete destruction of Israel. So as long as there is no way to reach an agreement on the basis of mutual recognition, and mind you that the Palestinians, to this day, Mahmoud Abbas is rejecting the idea that he would recognize Israel as the Jewish nation state, then there cannot be any solution except imposed unilaterally. Now, we did try this once, and we got Hamas and rockets on all the south of Israel. So Israelis are, I think, rightly suspicious. So as someone who has been in peace now since my youth and has supported the end of the occupation, I don't think it's an honest assessment of the situation to say that Israel has this greed for continuing the occupation, because Israel has agreed to the two-state solution on fair terms repeatedly. And so part of the responsibility for the continuation of the occupation, in my mind at this point most, but at least part, is for a Palestinian recalcitrant leadership who wants nothing except a one-state solution, which will basically be an Arab country, and the Jews will become a minority in it.
Okay, we have two more questions, and then I think we'll head towards the end. First, you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Arild Wegener. I have a brief factual question. To what extent do the young, embittered Palestinians look upon ISIL and similar organizations as heroes? And if they do they try to join up with them, to join the ranks of ISIL? And if they do that, what are the implications in terms of their attitudes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if and when they come back, if and when they survive?
And we'll take the second question as well at the same time. I think the lady over there by the window.
My name is Katrine Jensen. I am chair of the Norwegian Palestine Committee. I would like a comment on two issues. The first thing is the economic development in Israel, where they spend their budget more and more on military and security measures and less on welfare. So we have increased social differences, and to which extent does this strengthen extreme positions? And secondly, 2 days ago I was denied entry into Israel and seriously mistreated by the border police or passport control and security staff in Ben Gurion. And Israel can, of course, deny whomever they like. That's one issue. But one of the passport control officers, and I don't know if this is a religious extremist or if it's a secular Israeli or what, but his comment to me was, "What are you looking at? I know you're jealous because we are Jews, the chosen people. We rule the world." Now, if I had said something like that, it would be stated as an anti-Semitic comment. And I would never say that because I don't believe that Jews rule the world. So he's a representative of the state. He's got his instructions from the Ministry of Interior. And do you have any comment to what this says about the mindset of the Israelis?
Okay, thank you. I think we'll end the questions from the audience there, and then make this your final contribution now. Who will start? There's two questions here.
You want to start that one? Or
Erling, they're all pointing at you, so.
Okay. I don't think I will answer the last question. As for ISIL, there has been some. I'm not sure if I remember it correctly, but some polls that show a bit of support for ISIL in Palestinian population. I never met anyone. All the Muslim Palestinians I've been talking to think ISIL is a disgrace to the Muslim faith. So at least it's not great. I saw today Hamas said that ISIL doesn't exist in Gaza. It's just on the internet. So I think that was the question I could answer to. Seems to have been my task to talk for the Palestinians here. So just want to comment a bit on what you said about the Palestinian state. What kind of Palestinian state are they rejecting? Because there's much talk about these percents of land, but what most Palestinians feel is that Arafat in Oslo went too far. He was in a corner. He had nothing to lose by he had a lot of to win by making an agreement, and he was in a corner. We had much options. So he agreed to a lot of things he shouldn't agree to. For one thing, the Palestinian state is supposed to have borders controlled by Israel. It will not control its airspace. It will not have an army, but the Israeli army have the right to go in if they feel the security of Israel is threatened. So there are a lot of those frameworks for a state. They think is that kind of state is no reason to have it. It's just a way of continuing the occupation with the Palestinians conducted the occupation. That's a lot of Palestinians thinking of it that way. And when it comes to refugees, I think I've talked to to some of these who are refugees and ask for the right of return. And I asked them, have you ever been to the home you left in Haifa? Do you know if it exists? What would it be like to come there? What would you do with the people living there? But they never think of it in practical ways of that. It's a principle for them. It's like they need to get accepted that there was something wrong done against Palestinians. They want the UN resolutions accepted, and then they can start to negotiate on that basis. That's the way of thinking there, I think.
Thank you. Hanne, quite a few comments, I guess.
Do I? I'm not sure if I do. I don't see you, but to the woman in the back. There you are. I think that kind of comments from security guards are incredibly damaging to Israel's reputation. Incredibly damaging, and it's one of the problems is that I think those are the people that most meet, and it's so easy to generalize from those comments to what Israel actually stands for. Israel has a super policy problem, PR problem when it comes to mainstreaming, socializing, whatever, forming, shaping how their security guards actually talk and speak. It's been a big problem in the security services, big problem in the IDF. And again, I'm very reluctant to generalizing from what stories you hear, I mean, with people, and to the degree to which that is representative for a national identity or a national soul. The surveys and research that has been done on what Israel or Israelis stand for would not support that kind of like we are the chosen people blur. And it's also been a few, I know there have been a few measures taken inside of Israeli police and also in IDF to change that. I see in the IDF, because there's been something called, I guess most of you know, the Settlement Watch, for example. Lots of horrendous stuff happen on not Settlement Watch, I mean Checkpoint Watch. Lots of horrendous stuff and really damaging things happen on checkpoints. And one of the things that you see, for example, in the IDF then is that IDF, how representative is what a soldier does on a checkpoint to the IDF, for example? How representative is it? The IDF has had a very big problem of, I mean, how can I say it? IDF is a huge institution. The strength of the IDF, for example, is that it's a people's army. It has the ability to call up 400,000 people in 48 hours, for example. Now it has a standing army of 179,500.
We're not allowed to know these numbers.
They're public. They're public. They're on a website. I can show it to everyone. Anyway. So how can you control what actually so many people will say? That's literally about 600,000 people. Each checkpoint is rather monotonous. They are not necessarily controlled further up in the chain. I'm just saying it because there's been it's obviously Israel, you know, it's a quite general statement of people say that Israel is losing the PR war, obviously. Israelis are very aware of that. It's mentioned very often, and still you can hear, and one of the problems is that the people lowest down the chain are the ones, and those who are the furthest away from, I was about to say control, are, for example, what you meet in, what you met. I'm not saying that doesn't cover anything, but it's, or that no other Israelis would stand for such opinions, but I'm very reluctant to generalize it, to saying that that's the sort of the spirit of the Israeli soul, also to the degree to which Israeli police and the IDF has tried to change it, because I think, regardless, it's very, very damaging for Israel's face. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Also remember that she asked about social inequality and decrease of spending in social welfare and increase in
I guess the subtext was that we are promoting war by spending on the military, but generally Israelis think of themselves as promoting defense by spending on the military. Israel does not have expansive intentions. It just feels it lives in a very hostile region and should be always able to protect itself. And note also that Israel cannot afford to lose any war. The Arab countries around us can afford to lose war. If Israel once loses a war, it's done. So this is not because we are naturally supportive of injustice, just because Israel has different needs and is in a different security situation than Norway is. As for this very rude guard, I'm not going to, I can't apologize for him. I've never heard an Israeli say that people are jealous for us for being Jews. This is not something we generally think, but perhaps among the ultra-Orthodox rather than the Zionists, who are extremely religious and not Zionists. And perhaps I should end with one more comment that I've neglected Erling's question about what Zionism is. In a nutshell, Israel is not a state of the Jewish religion. It's a state created by secular Jews who have wrestled with the problem of what their identity is and have not found a place within the emerging political order of nation states, where they feared that they would always be rejected as not belonging and not patriotic enough. So the Zionist solution was that if all peoples achieve liberty by having their own national liberation movement, then the Jews should follow suit and do the same. My grandmother, I was tempted to mention my biography because my mother was on Checkpoint Watch, the leftist organization for human rights. Until her death of cancer most recently, she would go every Friday. But her mother was a pioneer, and there could be no one further from the Jewish religion than my grandmother, who came to Israel in 1924 to build a Jewish homeland. She was a Marxist in a Shomer HaTzair, and these crazies, they took out God from all the texts of the holidays, because you are not, in Orthodox Marxism, you're not supposed to say God, you're supposed to say the great abstract. And if you don't, you are considered a sinner. So these people were extremely, radically secular, and so was my father, who was a refugee from Slovakia, not a survivor of the Holocaust. For some odd reason, this boy, at the age of 12, after the Nazi invasion of Czechoslovakia, understood what his own father didn't. And I can't say he envisioned the Holocaust, but he said this would not be good and convinced his own father to come to Israel, where he was arrested by the Brits. They had nowhere to go. So this was the backbone of Zionism. And Zionism, in a short definition, in terms of political science, is the application of the universal right of self-determination to the Jewish people. Mind you, the Jewish people are not the Jewish religion. One could be Jewish, religious, and not a Zionist. But if you conceive of yourself, like I do, as a secular Jew belonging to a national identity which is Jewish, then you are a Zionist. And if I have, is there a minute, or are we done?
There's a minute. Yeah.
Then I'll tell a story, because usually, Erling, I spend half a semester answering this question, because I teach the history of Zionism, and so to explain to students...
Come and study with you.
You're welcome. How Zionism began from the idea of liberty and from the gradual realization of Jews that they will not achieve full equality within the context of European nation unless they give up their aspiration to a Jewish identity. So I spent half a semester explaining this question, which is very complex, why Jews couldn't, as they can now, live in other states. And then I was in the conference, and there was this Holocaust survivor. It was screened. She was not there. But in the beginning of the conference, they screened these little snippets of testimonials from Holocaust survivors. For some odd reason, I don't know why the organizer chose the silliest question to ask all these Holocaust survivors. What was the happiest moment for you at the end of the war? These people came from hell now. What do you expect? So, of course, almost all of them said when the Red Army or the American Army released the camps. So this was the happiest moment. And this one woman said, the happiest moment was when I reached the ship of the illegal immigration to Israel and saw a sign in Hebrew above the door saying entrance. And I thought, this woman just came from hell, and she's going to what the Jews consider the promised land, and the happiest moment is entering a ship. And luckily, the interviewer also didn't understand what she was saying. And he said, what do you mean? Is this like a symbolic moment? And she said, no, no, you don't understand. I never saw Hebrew letters this size. And I'm telling you, my heart stopped beating. Because this is the whole, I can spend semesters explaining this. But for this woman, this is everything. A place where there would be a public sphere in which one would not feel alien. And the Jews haven't had that for 2,000 years. So the answer to what is Zionism is it's an application of the right of self-determination, where you could be yourself in private as well as in public. And if you are a consistent Zionist, then you support the same right for Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you for that. One last comment from
I'm just going to say one thing about the budgets. Yes. The increase in budgets, it's been about 17.9% of BNP, and I think it's increased about 26. It's a little, they play a little bit with numbers because it's different whether they will include or not include the Ministry of Defense. But it's seen as, or used as a quite direct response to the Arab winter, or whatever you call it now, actually. Israel has really been on the fence with what to do, but one of the results is to increase the defense budget. So I'm a little bit, to what degree, whether it will, did you say that it would feed or fuel extreme sentiments? Too early to say.
Okay. Before we give a hand to the panel, I'll just use 20 seconds to promote next week's breakfast meeting. In Norwegian, I samarbeid med Senterpartiets programkomité, så spør vi om det overordnede, eller overnasjonale systemet har spilt for litt, og vi ser comeback til nasjonalstaten I Europa. I panelet så har vi Ola Borten Moe, Janne Håland Matlari og Nils August Andresen og Stein Inge Jørgensen fra Morgenbladet. Det onsdag neste uke, altså klokken 8. Thank you so much.